Hey everyone, welcome back. I'm wandering around in Minecraft tonight, letting the world build itself block by block while I share another story from Reddit. This one isn't about crafting or survival in the game. It's about survival in real life, when family crosses the line and tries to control your choices. Today's story is titled, My Parents Threatened to Raise My Rent Unless I Was My Sister's Free Nanny. They didn't know I'd vanish overnight, leaving them drowning in the mess. It's a sharp reminder of what happens when manipulation replaces love. I'm a 27-year-old who put in years of effort to finish university and secure my first role as a kindergarten teacher. The pay isn't great, but I find joy in working with young kids, which makes it rewarding. Still, finances are tight when you're just starting out. That's why I'm still living with my parents in the same quiet neighbourhood home I grew up in. It's not the most thrilling arrangement, but it works for now. They charge me a fair amount for rent, as my mum often points out, and I cover my own food expenses. I also help out around the house, tending to the garden, fixing small things, and even organising the shed last fall when Mum twisted her ankle. It's not fancy, but it's a temporary setup. My goal was to stay for a few years, save up, and eventually move into my own place. Straightforward, right? That was the plan until my older sister Clara came back into the picture. Clara, who's 34, has always been a bit of a free spirit, to put it kindly. Growing up, she was the favourite. I'm not sure if it was because she was the eldest or if our parents just had a soft spot for her, but she could get away with anything. She left college twice, first claiming it wasn't stimulating enough, then saying the coursework was too intense. She's never kept a job for long, always quitting when things got tough and blaming everyone but herself. Our parents were always there to pick up the pieces. Behind on bills, they'd cover it. Car trouble, they'd pay for the fix. Got a parking ticket? Dad would handle it while grumbling about how the system is unfair to young people. Meanwhile, I was working part-time at a cafe to fund my education and taking out loans to cover the rest. Clara had been living independently, or so I thought, for the past few years. Turns out she was drifting between rentals, always short on rent, and relying on our parents to keep her afloat. I only learned this when she showed up one day and casually dropped that she was expecting a baby. I'm not one to judge someone's choices, but Clara wasn't exactly in a stable place. The baby's father was a guy she'd been dating briefly, and from what I pieced together, he wasn't excited about the news and disappeared soon after she told him. You'd think this would be the moment Clara decided to turn things around, but instead, she turned to our parents, who immediately jumped into action. Within days, they were converting the attic into a small living space for her, complete with a mini kitchen. I didn't ask about the funding, but I overheard Dad mention pulling from their savings. I tried to stay out of it. After all, it was their decision to support Clara, but I could see where this was heading. My parents have a habit of pulling everyone into Clara's messes, like they expect the whole family to rally around her no matter how much chaos she creates. At first, I told myself it wouldn't impact me. Clara would have her own space in the attic, and I could keep living my life. Sure, it was frustrating to see them go all out for her again, but I tried not to let it bother me. That worked for about a month. Then, small things started adding up. Mum began dropping hints about how I should spend more time with Clara since she was going through a tough time. This, despite me coming home, drained from teaching all day. Then came the subtle guilt trips. Dad would say things like, "Clara's all alone right now, and pregnancy is so tough on her own," giving me a look like I was supposed to fix everything. Mum wasn't any better. She'd weave Clara into every chat. "You've got it so good, Lily," she'd say over breakfast. "Not everyone's as fortunate as you." Fortunate? I was barely making ends meet while trying to build a career and save for the future. Meanwhile, Clara was getting a fully furnished attic apartment and endless support. Things escalated when I overheard Mum and Dad talking one evening. I was in the dining room sorting through some work papers, and they were in the den. "She's going to need a lot of support when the baby arrives," Dad said. "Of course," Mum replied. "We'll all help out." "All?" Mum asked. "You, me and Lily," Dad said, as if it was a given. I nearly spilled my coffee. They hadn't mentioned any of this to me, but clearly, they'd already decided I was part of their plan. That's when the unease set in. I didn't know the details yet, but I could sense they were about to drag me into Clara's drama, whether I wanted it or not. The feeling only grew as Clara started spending more time at the house. She'd lounge in the living room, venting about how tough pregnancy was and how unfair it was that her ex had left her. She'd make offhand remarks about how lucky I was to have a stable job and no responsibilities like hers. I held back from saying anything, not wanting to start a fight, but I kept thinking, why is this always my problem? By the time we sat down for dinner one night, I had a bad feeling something was coming. Everyone was acting too relaxed, like they were hiding something. Mum and Dad were chatting about random things, the neighbour's new patio, the weather, and Clara was just scrolling on her phone. It felt staged, like they were waiting for the perfect moment to spring something on me. Dinner was lasagna, Dad's usual we need to talk meal. I don't know why he thinks lasagna softens the blow of bad news. I tried to focus on eating and not overthink it, but halfway through, Mum cleared her throat. "So, we've been discussing," she said, glancing at Dad. I froze. Those words never led to anything good. With Clara moving back in, she's going to need some support. "Support with what?" I asked, keeping my tone even. Dad chimed in before Mum could respond. "The baby, obviously. Clara's got a lot to handle, and it's going to be tough for her to do it all alone." I looked at Clara, who was still glued to her phone, acting like this had nothing to do with her. "Okay, but how does that involve me?" I asked, setting my fork down. My parents exchanged a glance, like they were strategizing how to phrase their next words. "Well," Mum started, "you're already here, and you're great with kids, being a teacher. We thought you could help with childcare." "Help?" I echoed, raising an eyebrow. Dad nodded eagerly. "Yeah, just watch the baby sometimes while Clara gets settled. It wouldn't be all the time, just when you're around." I couldn't believe it. "You want me to babysit a newborn after teaching all day?" "You're home by 4 most days," Mum pointed out. "And you're not paying full rent," Dad added, as if that justified it. I stared at them, trying to wrap my head around what they were asking. This wasn't just a small favour. They were expecting me to take on a major responsibility for free. "Hold on," I said, leaning back. "You're saying I should come home from work and then take care of Clara's baby?" Mum sighed, like I was being unreasonable. "It's not like that, Lily," Mum said, her voice firm. "We're all in this together. We're a family and families support each other." I blinked, stunned. "All of us?" I echoed. "Yes," Dad said, nodding. "That's what families do." At that moment, Clara looked up from her phone, a smirk playing on her lips. "Geez, Lily, I didn't realise helping me out was such a hassle for you." My jaw clenched, and I gripped the edge of the table to keep from losing it. Her smug tone was infuriating. "It's not about that," I said, struggling to stay calm. "I have my own life, my own job. I can't just drop everything to take care of your kid. You're being selfish," Dad snapped, his voice cutting through the air. "Clara's going through a lot right now. The least you can do is lend a hand." "Why is it my job to clean up her messes?" I shot back, my voice louder than I intended. "She's 34. She's not a teenager anymore." Clara gave me a dramatic eye roll. "Wow, real nice, Lily," she muttered. "That's enough," Mum said sharply, her tone leaving no room for argument. "We're all in this together, like it or not. You're living in our house and we expect you to pitch in." "Pitch in?" I said, incredulous. "I pay rent. I buy my own food. I help with chores. Isn't that enough?" The room fell quiet, the tension thick enough to choke on. Clara sat there, looking smug, like she knew she'd already gotten her way. Finally, Mum spoke, her voice measured. "If you're not willing to help, maybe we need to reconsider your arrangement here." My stomach twisted. "Are you saying you'll kick me out?" "No one's saying that," Dad said quickly, but his tone lacked conviction. "But if you're not going to contribute more, we might need to talk about increasing your rent." I stared at them, my mind reeling. I'd been doing everything I could to be responsible, to pull my weight, and now they were trying to guilt me into taking on Clara's responsibilities. "You're seriously doing this?" I asked, my voice trembling. "You're punishing me for not wanting to be Clara's free babysitter?" "It's not punishment," Mom said, her voice softening but still firm. It's about being part of this family. I stood up, my chair scraping against the floor. It's about you two enabling Clara, like always, and trying to drag me into it. Don't talk about your sister that way, Dad snapped. I'm done, I said, turning toward the hallway. You want to help Clara? Fine, but don't rope me into it. I stormed upstairs and shut my bedroom door, my heart racing. I couldn't believe how far this had gone. I'd always known my parents favoured Clara, but this was a new low. It felt like they were trying to control me, keeping me under their roof so they could push me into doing whatever they wanted. What stung the most was Clara's attitude, sitting there, barely saying a word, acting like none of this was her problem. And in her mind, it probably wasn't. Mum and Dad were already bending over backwards for her, and now they were trying to pull me into the mess. I barely slept that night, replaying the dinner over and over in my head, thinking of all the things I could have said but didn't. By the time my alarm buzzed the next morning, I was still furious but mostly felt trapped. Moving out wasn't an option yet. I was only a few months into my teaching job, and my savings weren't enough. Rent in the area was sky high, and my salary couldn't cover it on my own. For the next few days, the house was a minefield. Mum and Dad were clearly upset with me, but instead of addressing it directly, they resorted to snide remarks. Must be nice to come home and relax, Dad said one evening, as I walked in from work. Yeah, not everyone has that kind of freedom, Mum added, barely glancing up from her book. I ignored them and headed to my room. I wasn't in the mood to argue. Anything I said would just make things worse, and I was too exhausted to deal with it. Clara, meanwhile, was acting like she owned the place. She hadn't fully moved in yet, but she was over almost every day, leaving her stuff everywhere, shoes by the armchair, her bag on the kitchen counter, random shopping totes strewn across the floor. One evening, I came home to find her sprawled on the couch, eating chips and watching some loud reality show. She barely looked up when I walked in. Just gave a quick yo before turning back to the TV. I waited for a moment, half expecting an apology, or even a small acknowledgement of the tension, but nothing came. I went to the kitchen to grab dinner and opened the fridge. My milk was gone, my fruit was missing, and the leftovers I'd saved were nowhere to be found. Did you take my food? I asked, walking back to the living room. Clara didn't even glance up. Dad said it was fine. He didn't pay for it, I said, my voice sharp. She rolled her eyes. Relax, Lily. It's just food. It's my food, I said, my temper flaring. If you want something, buy it yourself. God, you're so dramatic, Clara said, tossing the chip bag onto the coffee table. It's not like I took your phone or something. I stood there fuming as she grabbed her phone and started scrolling again, completely dismissing me. I wanted to scream, to call her out for her entitlement, but I knew it wouldn't matter. Clara had always gotten away with this kind of thing because our parents let her, and now they were trying to make me part of the problem. The next morning, Dad caught me in the kitchen while I was pouring coffee. You need to say sorry to Clara, he said, his tone stern. For what? I asked, genuinely confused. For making her feel like she's not welcome, he said, folding his arms. She's got enough on her plate without you making things harder. Are you kidding? I said, turning to face him. She ate my food and acted like it was nothing. How is that my fault? Dad sighed, like I was the one being difficult. It's just food, Lily. You can buy more. That's not the issue, I said, trying to stay calm. The issue is she doesn't respect me, and you're letting her get away with it. Respect, Dad said, almost laughing. This is her home too. You need to learn to compromise. At that moment, I realised arguing was pointless. Dad didn't care about my perspective. He just wanted me to go along with whatever kept Clara comfortable. Over the next week, things got worse. Mum and Dad kept hinting they'd raise my rent if I didn't step up. Clara started moving more of her belongings into the house, piling boxes and furniture in the attic. She even started using my shower because the one in her space wasn't good enough. I tried to keep my distance, but it felt like they were all determined to pull me into their drama. One evening, I came home to find Mum in the dining room with a notebook full of numbers. We need to talk, she said, motioning for me to sit. I hesitated but sat down, bracing myself. We've been looking at our budget, Mum said, pointing to the notebook. With Clara moving in, costs are going up. We think it's fair for you to chip in more. You're already charging me rent, I said. How much more do you want? Mum shrugged. We're still working it out. But if you're not going to help with the baby, this seems reasonable. I couldn't believe it. They were using my rent to pressure me into babysitting. This is absurd, I said, standing up. I'm already paying my share. If you want me out, just say it. No one's saying that, Mum said quickly. We're just asking you to do your part. My part? I repeated. You mean Clara's part? Mum started to respond, but I didn't wait to hear it. I walked out and headed to my room, slamming the door behind me. At that point, I knew I couldn't keep living like this. I couldn't stay in a home where my boundaries were ignored, and my parents viewed me as nothing more than unpaid help. I didn't know exactly how or when I'd make my escape, but one thing was clear: I had to leave. That realization grew stronger every time Clara breezed through the house, like it was her personal domain, or when Mum and Dad tried to guilt me into taking on her responsibilities. But wanting to leave and actually doing it were worlds apart. My savings were still modest, not enough to easily cover a place of my own, and the thought of upending my life felt daunting. Still, staying wasn't an option. If I gave in now and became Clara's stand-in parent, it would never end. They'd keep piling on more until I was trapped. I didn't want to wake up 5 years from now, still in that house, bitter and drained. The next morning, I poured myself a tea and opened my laptop. I pulled up the budgeting app where I tracked my expenses: rent, groceries, gas, student loans. I wasn't the best at saving, but I'd been tucking away a bit each month. After crunching the numbers, I saw I could swing a move if I found something affordable and cut back on non-essentials for a while. As luck would have it, a colleague, Sarah, had mentioned a month ago that she was looking for a roommate. I hadn't given it much thought at the time, but now it felt like a golden opportunity. I shot her a text. Hey, is that roommate spot still open? She replied within minutes. Yeah, still looking. You interested? Maybe. Can we chat after work? Sarah's response was quick. Sure thing. That afternoon, I lingered at school until the building quieted down, then headed to Sarah's classroom. She was at her desk, sorting through a pile of quizzes. What's going on? She asked, glancing up. I hesitated, unsure how much to reveal. I'm thinking about moving out of my parents' place, I said finally. Things are getting messy at home. Sarah nodded, like she didn't need the details to get it. The offer's still there, she said. It's a small apartment, but it's decent. Rent's $850. A month, utilities included. It was a bit more than I'd hoped, but I could make it work. When would you need someone to move in? Whenever you're ready, she said with a grin. The room's yours if you want it. I told her I'd decide by the weekend, but deep down, I was already sold. This was my ticket out. Now I just had to figure out how to leave without sparking a family war. If my parents caught on too early, they'd try to derail me. Guilt trips, arguments, maybe even hiking my rent on the spot to keep me stuck. So I played it cool. I started packing slowly, focusing on essentials. Clothes, personal items, anything I couldn't replace. I stashed everything in my car's trunk, hidden under an old quilt to avoid questions. I also started documenting everything, just in case. I snapped photos of my room, my belongings, my electronics, anything that might become an issue later. I knew from experience that Clara had a knack for forgetting what belonged to whom, and I wasn't about to lose my stuff in the chaos of moving out. One night, while the house was quiet, I drafted a formal 30-day notice letter. I'd read online that, even though I wasn't a legal tenant, putting things in writing was smart. I didn't want them claiming I'd left without warning. I barely slept that night, constantly checking the time and listening for footsteps. At 5:30 a.m, I slipped the letter under my parents' bedroom door. The fallout was swift. When I got home from work that day, Mum and Dad were waiting in the den, the letter in Mum's hand like it was evidence of a crime. What's this? She asked, her voice tight. My notice, I said, keeping my tone even. You're actually going through with this? Dad asked, his eyes wide with disbelief. Yes, I said firmly. I've found a place, and I'm moving out by the end of the month. You can't just walk away, Mum said, her voice cracking. What about Clara? What about her baby? I took a deep breath, steadying myself. Clara and her baby aren't my responsibility. I've done my part here, but I can't keep living like this. What's wrong with you? Dad snapped, his voice rising. We've done so much for you, letting you stay here, helping you get started. And this is how you thank us. I clenched my jaw, fighting the urge to shout. I pay rent, I said, through gritted teeth. I buy my own groceries. I've been taking care of myself since I graduated. I'm not your fallback plan for Clara. Mum's eyes welled up, which wasn't surprising. She always cried when things didn't go her way. How can you do this to us? She said, her voice breaking. To your sister? I didn't respond. There was no point. They weren't listening, and I wasn't backing down. The next few weeks were painfully tense. Mum and Dad barely spoke to me, except to toss out passive-aggressive jabs. Clara acted like nothing was wrong, continuing to take over the house like it was her personal playground. One evening, I came home to find she'd moved more of her stuff into the attic. Boxes stacked on the old armchair, clothes spilling out of bags. It was like she was claiming every corner of the house. Don't mind the mess, she said casually when I walked in. I didn't reply, just headed to my room and shut the door, swallowing the anger building inside me. In the final days before the move, I focused on tying up loose ends. I packed the last of my things, double-checked my budget, and coordinated with Sarah to get the apartment keys. Everything was coming together, but I still felt a knot of anxiety. The morning of the move was the hardest. I'd arranged for Sarah to come by with her SUV, and we planned to load up my remaining stuff and head to the apartment. I'd timed it early, hoping Clara would still be asleep, and my parents would be too caught up in their morning routine to notice. But nothing can ever go smoothly with my family. I was carrying boxes to my car when I heard Dad's footsteps behind me. What's this? He demanded, standing in the driveway. I told you I'm moving today, I said, not stopping as I loaded another box. You can't just sneak out like this, he said, his voice sharp. We're family, Lily. Are you turning your back on us? I set the box in the trunk and faced him. I'm not turning my back on anyone, I said, keeping my voice steady. I'm choosing to live my own life. There's a difference, Dad opened his mouth to argue. But before he could, Mum appeared on the porch, arms crossed, tears already streaming down her face. You're really leaving? She asked, her voice trembling. Yes, I said, holding my ground. What about Clara? She sobbed. What about the baby? I sighed, the weight of their expectations pressing down on me. I've said it before, Mum. Clara and her baby aren't my responsibility. I can't keep putting my life on hold to fix her problems. That set her off. How dare you talk about your sister like that? She cried. She's trying her best. Is she? I snapped. Because it looks like she's just waiting for everyone else to take care of her. At that moment, Clara appeared at the front door, looking half asleep but fully aware of the drama. She smirked, leaning against the frame. Don't worry, Mum, she said, her voice laced with mockery. If Lily wants to be selfish, let her. We'll be fine without her, I bit back a retort, my hands curling into fists. Instead, I turned to Sarah, who had just pulled up. Let's finish this, I said, ignoring the chaos unfolding behind me. Sarah gave me a quick nod and started helping me load the rest of my boxes. My parents kept at it, hurling every guilt trip they could muster. Who's going to help us now? Mum wailed. How can you be so cold? Dad shouted, but I kept moving, focusing on the task at hand. With Sarah's help, we loaded the last of my things and drove away, leaving the shouting behind. As we pulled out of the driveway, I felt a mix of relief and uncertainty. I was finally free, but the weight of my family's expectations lingered, and I knew this wasn't the end of the drama, just the start of a new chapter. Clara stood in the doorway, sipping a soda and watching the scene unfold like it was her personal reality show. By the time we finished loading my things, I was exhausted, as if I'd just run a gauntlet. I paused in the driveway, glancing back at the house I'd called home for so long. It should have felt nostalgic, but all I felt was a wave of relief. I climbed into my car, started the engine, and pulled away, with Sarah trailing behind in her SUV. When we arrived at Sarah's apartment complex, the weight on my shoulders lifted. The place wasn't luxurious, but it was tidy, peaceful, and, most importantly, free of family drama. Sarah helped me carry my boxes inside, and within an hour, I was settled into my new room. We collapsed on the couch afterward, talking about lesson plans and school gossip. It felt refreshingly normal, a taste of the life I'd been craving amidst my family's chaos. That calm lasted maybe 3 hours before my phone started blowing up. Texts, calls, voicemails, my parents, uncles, cousins, even distant relatives. Apparently, Dad had broadcasted to the entire family that I'd abandoned them, and everyone had an opinion. "Lily, how could you abandon Clara like this?" one voicemail from my Uncle Tom began. "She's pregnant and struggling. Don't you care about family?" A text from a cousin read, "Selfish doesn't even cover it." The worst was Clara's social media. She'd gone full martyr, posting selfies with her baby bump and captions like, "Some people choose to walk away instead of supporting their own blood. My baby will grow up knowing real love." I blocked her on every platform. It was maddening, but I refused to get sucked back into their manipulation. This was exactly why I'd left, to escape the guilt trips and drama that defined my family. Things got stranger the following week at work. During my lunch break, Dad showed up at school, red-eyed and pleading to talk. He launched into a speech about how I'd torn the family apart and how Clara was barely holding it together without me. It was so embarrassing that my principal had to escort him out. I spent the rest of the day dodging curious glances from co-workers, knowing they were wondering what kind of soap opera I was tangled in. But that incident had a silver lining. I opened up to a few colleagues about the situation, and they rallied around me. "Let me know when you're ready to grab the rest of your stuff," Sarah said, tossing me her extra car keys. "We'll make it fast." A couple of weeks later, I realised I'd left behind a folder with critical documents, my teaching licence, tax records, and other work-related papers. In my rush to leave, I'd overlooked the small box where I kept them. So Sarah and another co-worker, Emma, came with me to my parents' house to retrieve them. I thought I was prepared for whatever they might pull, but I underestimated their audacity. When we reached my room, it was unrecognisable. Clara had taken over, her belongings mixed with mine in a blatant power grab. My dresser was stuffed with her clothes, baby gear was scattered across my desk, and my bookshelf had been cleared out to hold her random trinkets. "What is this?" I muttered, mostly to myself. Clara appeared in the doorway, holding a smoothie and looking completely unfazed. "Oh hey," she said, like we were just catching up. My stuff might have gotten mixed in. Hard to keep track of what's whose now I stared at her, stunned by her nerve. "You mean the stuff in my room, where I've lived for years?" She shrugged, sipping her drink. "You're gone now, so what's the big deal?" It was obvious. She'd done this deliberately to mess with me, but she didn't know I'd prepared for this. I pulled out my phone and opened the album of photos I'd taken of my room before she'd started moving in. "I've got pictures of everything," I said, showing her the screen, "and a detailed list of my stuff, including serial numbers for my electronics." Clara's expression soured, but before she could respond, Mum and Dad stormed in. "What's going on here?" Mum demanded, her voice sharp. "I'm picking up some things I forgot," I said, staying calm. "But Clara seems to think my stuff is hers now. Good thing I documented everything I own." Dad's face hardened. "If you take anything that's not yours, I'll call the cops." I let out a dry laugh. "Go for it," I said. "We can also discuss the legality of you going through my room and touching my things without permission." That silenced him. Sarah and Emma jumped in, helping me sort through the mess. Clara tried to claim my tablet was hers, but I showed her the receipt and a photo of the serial number. The more she realised her plan was failing, the more frustrated she got. "This is ridiculous," she shouted, throwing her hands up. "You're stealing from a pregnant woman." I turned to her, done holding back. "The only one trying to steal here is you," I said firmly. "Just like you've been trying to steal my time and energy by expecting me to raise your kid." That's over. With that, I grabbed the last of my things and we piled into Sarah's car. I didn't look back as we drove away. That was 7 months ago. Clara had her baby, and as I expected, things have unravelled. My parents are now stuck providing the childcare they tried to push onto me, all while juggling their own jobs. They're worn out and overwhelmed. From what I've heard through the few relatives who still talk to me, Clara hasn't even looked for work, claiming she's too overwhelmed to hold a job. She's still at my parents' house, living with a fussy newborn in an attic that's still half renovated, draining their savings. They've tried reaching out to me since I left. First came the angry voicemails about how ungrateful I was. When that didn't work, they switched to sob stories about how much the baby needed me. Lately, they've been sending pictures of my nephew with captions like, "Don't you want to meet your nephew?" or "He needs his aunt." I've blocked them on social media and set up filters to trash their emails. A couple of relatives who get my side keep me updated, but I've made it clear I'm not open to reconnecting until my parents and Clara own up to their behaviour and show real change. Ironically, if they'd just respected my boundaries and asked for occasional help with the baby, like reasonable people, I probably would have been happy to pitch in. I love kids and wouldn't have minded lending a hand now and then, but their attempt to force me into full-time childcare while disregarding my life and space ruined any chance of that. And that's my story. What I've learned from this mess is that sometimes the best thing you can do for yourself, and even for your family, is to stop enabling their toxic patterns. And that's where this one ends. In Minecraft, it's easy to walk away and start fresh somewhere else. In real life, it's much harder, but sometimes it's the only way to reclaim your peace. Family might not always understand, but setting boundaries is a form of survival too. Thanks for spending time here with me. I'll keep exploring in-game, and I'll be back soon with another story that's just as wild.